Death at Gallows Green, Chapter 14. Throughout the late 1800s, the average British citizen had little respect for the effectiveness of the police. Lack of training and opportunity, bureaucratic corruption, low pay, and even lower social status made it difficult to recruit good policemen. This was compounded by a reluctance to adopt modern scientific methods for criminal investigation and identification, and a lack of interest in new technologies of communication and transport. Most people felt that the police, taken all in all, were a sorry lot. Garrett Bindle, The Police in the 19th Century England. Dudley Pell turned in his chair and contemplated the detailed map of the county of Essex that hung on the plaster wall of the borough office in Colchester Town Hall. On the map, each of the county's boroughs was outlined in red, half-dozen smaller ones like Braintree and Bishop Stortford, of the larger ones Chelmsford and Colchester. Within each borough, the police districts were outlined in green, with clusters of coloured pins to represent each location of the constabulary. He had risen from humble beginnings as a simple constable in the district of Great Barrow, a black pin, as it were, to the position of chief constable of the Colchester borough, the only green pin. And now he had the enviable and useful authority of deploying and overseeing 2 red pins, inspectors, 5 blue pins, sergeants, and 40 black pins, constables. 47 pins in all, the entire borough force. His contemplation of the map was coloured with a certain justifiable pride. The success that had come Chief Constable Pell's way in the last 2 decades had not been without cost. His leg, but more than that, his time and energy, leaving him with none to spare. He spent it all in work, one way or another. Much of his expenditure was invisible to those beneath him, who imagined that what he did in this office, signing his name to papers, drinking tea, speaking with his subordinates, was all that he did. They had no imagination. They couldn't conceive of his real work, all that went into this office and outside of it, beyond the formal perimeters of the job, as it were. For of course the £400 a year plus 50 in allowance that the borough paid Dudley Pell did not come close to providing the kind of life, the house, the servants, the carriage, desired by his wife. Upon their marriage she had brought him a meagre but potentially profitable family interest in marine transport, which interest he had expanded over the years so that it now made up the difference between his salary and his wife's expenditures, with a nice bit left over for his own pleasures too. This enterprise required that he spent the latter part of each afternoon at the quay in Wivenhoe below Colchester, an altogether profitable activity, taking the long view of it. And even if his several undertakings did not require his full attention, he would have found something to keep him away from home. No matter what luxuries he brought her, Mrs. Pell grew more pettish every year. No joy after a long day at the office, on the quay, or in the field. So the chief constable was in the habit of spending even longer days doing the various things that he did, and very little time lounging in slippers and shirt sleeves at home where Mrs. Pell could sit upon him. Chief Constable Pell withdrew his attention from his private affairs and looked again at the map, pulling at his black whiskers. At the moment he was faced with a problem in the deployment of manpower. Sergeant Arthur Oliver of the district of Gallows Green had unfortunately gotten himself killed. Most unfortunately, for his was a record of exemplary service to the force. But there it was, he was dead, and Chief Constable Pell must assign his replacement. For the time being, P.C. Bradley from Manningtree could take on the district of the deceased in addition to his own, for Gallows Green and Manningtree were contiguous. Bradley was young and inexperienced, to be sure, but not unsuitable for the chief constable purposes, for he was ambitious and had a young family to support. Superintendent Hacking had been set on Edward Lakin, whose Dedham district also adjoined Gallows Green, but Lakin would not do at all, and Pell was glad to have succeeded in bringing the super around to his way of thinking. It was Bradley, then. Pell would keep his eye on the boy and see how he got on. Pell turned to his desk and picked up his pen to execute the appropriate order. He had just dipped it into his inkwell when there came a knock at the door. Upon his bidding it opened, and P.C. Nutter put his head through. "A gentleman to see you, sir," he said respectfully. "On what business?" Pell asked, not looking up. He signed the order with a flourish, blotted it, and held it out. "Take this and see that it's taken care of." "Yes, sir." P.C. Nutter took the order. "He says 'tis business of Sergeant Oliver's death, sir." Chief Constable Pell pushed his lips in and out, considering. Oh, very well then," he said at last. "Show him in." The man who came through the door had the easy, unconscious grace of a gentleman, but he did not wear a gentleman's clothes. His shapeless brown jacket was missing several buttons, his boots were muddy, and his brown felt hat a ruin. The chief constable, who required those about him to be neatly turned out, was not impressed. "Well," he demanded, leaning back in his chair, "what's this about Oliver?" The man sat down and took off his rag of a hat. "My name is Charles Sheridan. I'm an old friend of Artie Oliver. I took the photographs of the body." "Photographs?" "Of the body," Sheridan repeated distinctly. "Entered in evidence at the inquest." "Yes, those photographs." Pell had little use for the camera as part of a policeman's kit. A sharp eye, that's what was wanted. He regarded the man. "Well?" he asked. Sheridan's lips tightened. "I've come on the widow's behalf to ask about your plans for the investigation of her husband's death." "Ah, yes." Chief Constable gave a heavy sigh. "Poor woman, I understand she has a child." "Yes." "But the Standing Joint Committee has recommended a generous pension." Sheridan leaned forward and put his elbows on the Chief Constable's desk. "The investigation," he said pointedly, "is my concern at the moment." The superintendent gave the man's elbows a distasteful look. "My dear Sheridan," he said, "while the widow is due every sympathy, surely she cannot expect me to jeopardize the investigation by revealing its details." "Details are not necessary," Sheridan said. His eyes were hard as brown bottled glass. He fixed them on the chief constable. "A general outline will do." Pell frowned. "I'm afraid," he said carefully, "that I must refuse your request. To whom have you assigned the investigation?" "Why, I—" Pell's frown became a scowl. "I quite fail to see why it is the concern of— to whom?" The chief constable felt cornered. "P.C. Bradley from Manningtree will be doing the legwork," he said stiffly. "I, of course, will be informed of each development. Now, I must insist that I met Bradley at the funeral. He's a boy. Why was Lakin taken off the case?" The chief constable puffed out his cheek, feeling his face redden. "I'm not in the habit of discussing police affairs with civilians. Now, if you will be so good as to—" There was another knock on the door, and the chief constable felt a great relief. P.C. Nutter came in. "Sorry for the interruption, sir," he said. "The Superintendent Hacking has sent for you, sir." The chief constable did not rise. "Inform the superintendent that I shall be there shortly," he said. "And show this gentleman out, Constable Nutter. Our business is concluded." Sheridan got up and jammed on his hat. "You're making a mistake. Lakin is your best man." Pell did not answer. For several minutes after Sheridan had gone, he sat musing. Then he hoisted himself up and faced the map. He took down one blue pin and moved a black pin a precise quarter of an inch to the left. He surveyed the map for a moment, his lips pursed. In his careful planning, had he overlooked something he should have considered? He thought not. At last he turned and walked stiffly to the door.